Right now, Charles Oliveira remains the best lightweight in the world, despite his sudden loss of championship. If you're a more modern sports fan, though, you might not be aware of how difficult Oliveira's journey to championship gold was. As a result, the main topic of this film will be Oliveira's ascent to the top of the sport. This is Charles Oliveira's ascent. Brazil's São Paulo was the birthplace of Charles Oliveira on October 17, 1989. Oliveira, who was raised in poverty as a young girl, had a fantasy of playing professional football when she was younger and fell in love with the game. Unfortunately, Oliveira developed aberrant cardiac murmurs when she was 7 years old. In addition, he was found to have rheumatoid arthritis, which had a very negative impact on his ankles. Oliveira ended up spending 2 years in the hospital as a result, and the medical staff even warned him that he would eventually become paraplegic. Luckily, Oliveira got the care she needed and finally recovered completely with the help of her family and friends. Oliveira was first introduced to jiu-jitsu when she was 12 years old, and she soon started competing in events. He stopped competing after a few years and turned his attention to mixed martial arts, MMA, entering the professional ranks as one of the top prospects in 2008. The exceptional Brazilian would proceed to amass a flawless 12-0 record prior to his age 21 UFC debut in 2010. Oliveira made his octagon debut by quickly submitting Darren Elkins, which quickly caught the attention of the spectators. After winning 2 straight fights in the top MMA organization in the world, Oliveira's performance in the octagon would be somewhat inconsistent. The Bronx would defeat notable opponents including Jeremy Stephens, Nick Lentz, and Miles Jury in the course of the following 7 years, winning most of them via submission. Oliveira, though, fell short of that next level. When challenged against top-tier opponents, Oliveira suffered losses to such as Jim Miller, Cowboy Cerrone, Cub Swanson, Frankie Edgar, Max Holloway, Anthony Pettis, Ricardo Lamas, and Paul Felder. Not only was Oliveira losing these fights, but in most cases, he was either submitted or TKO'd. And while Oliveira was known for his ground game and he was showing improvement, something wasn't fully clicking, and he was getting dominated by the upper echelon of fighters. After losing to Paul Felder in 2017, Oliveira was still only 27 years old, but had already competed 17 times in the UFC, with an octagon record of 10-8-1. And while Oliveira always showed a ton of potential, most fans thought he'd never get over that hump and into the title picture. Before his next fight, Oliveira left the Macaco Gold team to join shootbox Diego Lima in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Oliveira already had a world-class Brazilian jiu-jitsu game, and he'd keep George Patino as his jiu-jitsu coach. But a change in gyms would give him a better chance to become a well-rounded competitor, especially in the striking department. The beginning of Oliveira's resurgence started when he accepted a late-notice fight against Clay Guida at UFC 225. The Bronx would submit the veteran Guida with a guillotine choke in the very first round, along with winning performance of the night honors. A few months later, he would return and finish out Christos Giagos with a second-round rear-naked choke. This time, he would not only win performance of the night, but also surpass Royce Gracie's record for the most submission victories in the organization. After 8 years in the UFC, Oliveira had quietly racked up 11 submission wins, and now fans were beginning to pay notice. Regaining confidence and adopting a more measured style of mixed martial arts, Oliveira defeated Jim Miller via rear-naked choke in the first round of their rematch to get revenge for a prior submission loss. This win over Miller earned Oliveira his 7th performance of the night honors. Oliveira would extend his submission and bonus records with his next victory over David Tamer, a fight where Oliveira showed a new level of striking, nailing Tamer with a vicious elbow before locking on an anaconda choke. This win would lead to Oliveira signing a new 5-fight deal with the UFC, where he would continue his incredible resurgence. The first fight on his new deal put Oliveira across the cage from Nick Lentz once again, this time in a trilogy to finally settle their score. While Oliveira racked up some TKO wins before entering the UFC, he'd score his first TKO victory in the octagon against Lentz, landing a barrage of punches to wrap up their trilogy. Now having won his last 5 fights in a row, Oliveira wanted to keep the momentum going and took a short-notice matchup against Jared Gordon. This time, Oliveira would score a clean knockout on Gordon, the first true KO of his UFC career. It was clear at this point that Oliveira's striking had significantly improved, and he was finally breaking out as a potential contender. Up next for Oliveira was a showdown with Kevin Lee, a former interim title challenger that was close at times to beating Tony Ferguson for the belt. This matchup was huge for Oliveira, as defeating Lee would answer a lot of questions fans had about where he stood in the division. Lee was known to have very solid wrestling, great cardio, and respectable striking. So when Oliveira submitted Lee with a third-round guillotine choke, it was clear that he was entering a different league. The win would also extend his streak of finishing opponents to 7 in a row, which tied Cowboy Cerrone for another UFC record. Oliveira would get the biggest matchup of his career up to that point against the aforementioned Tony Ferguson, who was coming off a loss to Justin Gaethje after winning his previous 12 fights. With a win, Ferguson could get back to challenging for a world title, having technically never lost his interim championship, but Oliveira knew he could slide into that spot if he could defeat Ferguson. Not only would Oliveira win, he'd completely dominate El Cucuy, almost breaking his arm early in the fight and displaying an evolved stand-up game en route to a unanimous decision victory. Around this time, Khabib Nurmagomedov would vacate his lightweight championship and retire from the sport after beating Justin Gaethje. In response, the UFC had Charles Oliveira face off against Michael Chandler for the vacant lightweight title. Chandler was riding the momentum of a legendary career outside of the octagon as a three-time Bellator champion and made a massive splash in his UFC debut, defeating Dan Hooker via TKO, right before the second showdown between Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor. Chandler came out hot against Oliveira, dropping De Bronx with some vicious punches in the first round. Oliveira would survive the round, but things definitely weren't looking good for him early on. Everyone expected Oliveira to change his game plan and bring Chandler to, but Oliveira did the exact opposite, walking down Chandler at the very beginning of the round and swarming him with punches to earn his second round TKO, along with becoming the undisputed UFC lightweight champion. It took him 28 bouts in the UFC, but Charles Oliveira had finally become lightweight king. As we've all heard as fight fans, it's one thing to win the title. It's another thing to defend it. In December of 2021, Oliveira was set to defend his belt for the first time against Dustin Poirier, who was fresh off back-to-back wins over Conor McGregor. Similarly to his fight against Chandler, Oliveira was dropped early by Poirier, but he once again overcame adversity by cinching in a rear-naked choke to retain his title. The victory over Poirier earned Oliveira his 12th performance of the night bonus, securing yet another UFC record. Up next for Oliveira was a title defense against Justin Gaethje, another matchup that put Oliveira against a heavy-handed striker with great wrestling skills. Unfortunately, just one day prior to the bout, Oliveira weighed in at 155.5 pounds, a half a pound over the limit. Because he was unable to make championship weight, Oliveira was forced to vacate his lightweight title, leaving only Justin Gaethje eligible to win the gold. While he entered UFC 274 as just a contender, Oliveira showed the heart of a champion, walking through Gaethje to earn a first-round submission after getting rocked multiple times. Oliveira may not be the official champion right now, but he's proven time and time again to be the best lightweight in the world and has established himself as the UFC's most dangerous finisher. One warrior who conquered hardship and never gave up on his objectives is Charles Oliveira. With 18 post-fight bonuses, 16 submission victories, and 19 finishes, he now owns the records for the most in UFC history. Oliveira is still only 32 years old, and it's frightening to think that he may be approaching the prime of his career at this point. As usual, if the video was enjoyable to you, do let me know by giving it a like and subscribing to our channel. Other than that, we sincerely appreciate your viewing and hope to see you on the next one.